Welcome to another edition of RotoWire TV. We are approaching the All-Star break, which means a couple things. One, we're kind of fumbling around for topics to start off our conversations with, both here on this broadcast, and two, in our Charging the Mound article. And two, we're fighting that push to talk all football all the time, just because we know certain people, that's all they want to hear. You know, Chris, there's always that dichotomy. We're always trying to get the new users on the site, get people ready for the start of seasons. But you got to service the customers that have been with us all along and been able to try to ride this out. I mean, we're only halfway through the season still.
Yeah, you know, there's the tyranny of the majority, right? There's the tyranny of all the football people. There's always more football people. That's why we have a court system, so the majority rule can't just like vote in all these horrible laws. You actually have courts. They don't do anything these days, but that's what they were designed for, at least. And then secondly, there's the tyranny of corporate profit, where you have to just go with whatever makes the most money all the time, and again, not take care of the guys who do baseball. So I think we should do some baseball, but I'm very deeply steeped in football because I just did the magazine, and even though there's kind of a 3 or 4 week lull between then and the start of training camp, I'm still very much involved in it. So let's start with a little baseball. We'll go to football. We'll cover both bases.
Okay. All right. Let's do baseball first. What's going to make the All-Star Game interesting to you? You and I both kind of profess not to care about it, and I really don't. I mean, I used to really watch it all the time. I'd root for the National League. I'd look to see my Reds get in the game. But now I just look for it to be a break. And I just don't know if it's because of fantasy, if it's because of my job, if it's because of interleague play, or whatever the reason is. I can't really drive myself to care that much anymore. But I know there's a segment of our audience that does, and I want to know how could you make it how could you make it so you can care about it anymore?
Let's put it this way. We're going to be in Vegas, and I'm definitely going to bet on the All-Star Game, and I still might not even watch it, okay?
Right.
And if you bet on something and you don't watch it, that means you really just do not care about it whatsoever. The second thing, the thing that actually would give me interest is if fantasy stats in the All-Star Game just counted. So if your guy was good enough to be an All-Star, then his fantasy stats would just then you would just benefit from that by getting his fantasy stats, or not benefit if it's a pitcher who gave up 5 runs, but at least you'd have a chance to get another opportunity to amass stats. I think we should probably do that, right? I mean, I know there's some arbitrariness to All-Stars, but that would just be part of the game. That would give me a little bit more interest. Obviously, guys don't play the whole game, so it's not that big a deal. But it would be kind of cool to see your guy hit a home run or get a win.
Yeah, it would. It would. One of the things we do going this time of year is we do the midseason retrospectives, whether it's midseason rankings or we talk about best the rest of the way or sell highs the rest of the way. I just did Baseball HQ's podcast with Patrick Davitt, and he had me have a sell high AL pitcher, sell high NL pitcher, et cetera, et cetera. So 8 guys, I just had to pull names of. I kind of would rather him give me a slate of names and say, would you do that with this, instead of trying to pull the names. I don't know why I'm wired that way. I don't like trying to come up with that. So one of the things I'm going to do after we do this is I'm going to come up with a list of 10 names of guys that are just buy highs and 10 sell high, buy lows and 10 sell highs. Or maybe I should do it the opposite. Maybe I should do sell lows and buy highs, just to be contrarian. But just to come up with lists, because I don't know, it's just weird that I just don't come up with those names readily.
Well, it's all context too, because we had Nando DeFino on today, and I said, what about Josh Hamilton? Oh, I like Hamilton. He's back on the tobacco, which is like being back on the juice, the crack, the whatever you need. I mean, tobacco is extremely addictive. You get that back in your system, man, you are set. Oh man, it makes me want to start up my tobacco habit. So he was fine with Josh Hamilton. I said, what about B.J. Upton? He said, oh, I've given up on him. And I said, okay, well, would you take Mitch Moreland for him? He's like, oh, hell no, I wouldn't take Mitch Moreland for him. So the reality is the whole sell high, sell low. It's yeah, I'm sure he would sell B.J. Upton low compared to his draft day value. But the question is, are people willing to sell low compared to their current value? When people say, well, I gave up on this player, doesn't that kind of mean you're willing to sell low even based on their current value? But it doesn't really mean that. It means I'm not as high as I used to be, but yeah, I'm not going to just give them to you. So this whole sell low or, sell high, buy low, this whole thing, you can't really do it. I mean, I just don't think it exists. I mean, yeah, now you could buy Iwakuma low because he got shelled a couple times. You can't buy Josh Hamilton low anymore. I mean, if the guy who had Josh Hamilton really was soured on him, now's the time to sell. Now you could get maybe 80 cents on his original dollar, not 2 weeks ago. But now he's not going to do it. Now he's going to say, oh, no, Hamilton's going to turn it around. I can't sell him now. So to me, it's just kind of you got to get very specific. What are you willing to give for this guy? What player are you willing to take? And that's where you might find out something where, wow, Jeff will do Moreland for B.J. Upton. Well, he really is low on B.J. Upton. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just It's too vague.
Yeah, and I did my exorcism trade already on B.J. Upton, so and it turned out, I mean, I did pretty well in that one, even though the guy I got back was Sin Chu, and he went through a pretty significant slump too. But I still, to this day, I do that trade again. Chu for Upton and Altuve, and an 11-team mixer where Altuve is like borderline playable. Just because of the team he's on, because you only, and this is one of those weird leagues where you only have a second baseman and a shortstop too. It's always league contextual, just like you said. I mean, it really only matters how it fits your league in particular. So, it's interesting that just to try to figure out who you want to exercise. Do you have a player that you just like? You're just sick of. I'm sick of him. Want to get rid of him?
Yeah, like all of them, but
healthy sick guy, healthy guys, not the.
I mean, would it kill Jason Hayward to get a base hit? Steal a base here or there, maybe hit a home run. Giancarlo Stanton. I mean, how about hitting 2 or 3 home runs about 5 games in a row? Okay, how about doing that and catching up? There's some guys I'm annoyed with, but I mean, it's not like, they're still the same guy. I mean, Starlin Castro. I mean, just everybody on my team. I hate all of them, but the only reason like my Yahoo team's even remotely in contention, if you want to even call it that, is because of Yasiel Puig and Dominic Brown and guys I got for nothing. The guys that I actually paid for are horrible. But I'm not going to dump them. I'm not going to sell them cheap. I don't really see like there's any reason that they're different players than they were when the season started. They just, they got hurt. They got into a slump. It just kind of snowballed a little bit. But you got to wait it out. I mean, I don't really see anything else you can do in that situation.
Yeah. When we're talking about doing trades right now, a lot of times it's always in these roto leagues, especially at least in the roto leagues, is trying to manage the categories and trying to figure out, okay, how do I gain the points? Where can I gain the points? Say if you're screwed in batting average, ERA, and WHIP, those are the categories where you're hurting the most, just as a hypothetical here. How do you catch up in those categories? We always talk it's easier to catch up in the counting stats, especially because of the dropout problem. But how do you catch up in these 3 categories? How do you go about doing it?
I mean, those are the categories I needed in Yahoo, and with pitching, I was just very scrupulous about, not streaming starters that were sketchy against medium teams. I was scrupulous about, even sitting guys like Madison Bumgarner when they went to Coors. So that's one thing, just being careful with that. 2, for hitter batting average, I mean, we did a charging them out with Andrew Martinez, and I asked him that question. He said, well, first off, cut, all the bad guys like Adam Dunn. Of course, I would never roster Adam Dunn for that very reason, but, cut the guys that are really batting average liabilities. So you can do that. And he said, it's tougher with a guy like Josh Hamilton. This is before he got back on the tobacco. Because it's, you're always worried he's going to have that bounce back, and historically he's actually a good batting average star, so I wouldn't have cut him. But B.J. Upton, I mean, you try to trade him for, the Mitch Morelands. I mean, that's what you have to get if you want to move B.J. Upton at this point, and maybe you want to do that because even when B.J. Upton's right, he's not going to be a batting average guy. Same with Ricky Weeks. Ricky Weeks is producing, but he's still going to hurt your average. Dan Uggla, all those guys, they got to go. But once you clean those guys out, it's hard to trade for batting average. You can't just trade for Miguel Cabrera or Mike Trout or Joey Votto without mortgaging half your team. So how do you target batting average? Are you going to trust Marcos Scudero because of the contact rate? Are you going to, it's even hard to get Manny Machado. Even though he doesn't hit home runs or steal bases, he's still very valuable and expensive, and he's got so much hype around him. So how do you target an isolated batting average guy? There's not too many really good batting average guys that don't come with a lot of other stuff. I think Ichiro's a good target for batting average. He's moved it up lately, and I think he still could hit 300 the rest of the way. So, a guy like that won't be that expensive, but it's not easy. A contact-heavy guy with some speed, and then you got to hope for a little luck.
Right, and typically you have to give up something else, too. I mean, if you're going to go target those isolated batting average guys because they're cheaper to get than the across all 5 categories sort of guys, you have to give up the spot. You're going to have to like roster guys that aren't going to help you with power, and you have to see what sort of effect that has too. So it's always I think that batting average might be the toughest of the 10 categories in your standard 5x5 league to catch up in. The ratios are pretty tough for pitching too because you just have to roster great pitchers. But you can give up a hitter for a pitcher. You can always trade a hitter for a pitcher, I've found.
Two other things. Okay, you can stream pitchers. You can also stream hitters in a daily league, right? Not a weekly league. Daily league, I mean, you can go and say, okay, well, this guy's he's a designated lefty killer, and I'll move him in, and he hits .315 against lefties. But you can do that. It's a real pain in the ass, and you need the roster spots to do it. But you can't do it. In a weekly league, you can't stream hitters. You can only stream pitchers. So that's harder. And so that's why pitching, it's easier because you can stream against really good matchups and make it up that way a little bit. You don't necessarily need to get a great pitcher. Obviously, there's no way to get ERA and WHIP without getting, the full package. I suppose you could get a guy, who doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but those guys are usually not good at ERA and WHIP. So it's very tough to trade for those things independently of the other categories. And then if you're getting a 4-category pitcher, as you said about the hitting, it's very expensive.
Yeah, what would it take to land? Like, say, I have Clayton Kershaw in Friends and Family, and he's ridiculously valuable at this point in time because, there's an innings cap, too, which makes him even more valuable because every start is sacred. Not so much as it was last year when we were at 1,250. We're at 1,400, but still, that's the sort of thing that is so hard to price right. And, it'd be really tough to pry him off of my team. So, that's the other thing that makes it tough to do that. All right, that's enough baseball for now. We got a lot of football to talk to. We're going to Vegas next week during the All-Star break. We're going to do a football draft. It's always way too soon, but we do it anyhow. It's kind of fun. It kind of gets us in the football mindset, actually. But this time of year, there's no news happening. What do you do? What do you like to talk about? What do you like to think about when it comes to fantasy football this time of year? You're done with the magazine. There's really only this one draft that you're doing. How are you going to get ready for your drafts? How are you starting to think about football right now?
Well, I have an NFFC online draft July 22nd, the week after, the Monday after Vegas. So, that's going to be a big one. That's a $100,000 grand prize. I'm doing some kind of slow draft for one of our partners for a little bit of money. I'm convincing Trevor, our producer, to run the team, and he's so traumatized by the damage that I inflicted on him while we won our baseball league. But his poor management really did deserve calling out on some occasions. But in any event, look, there's nothing going on. We just did a top 200 list, and I aggregated everybody's list, and you kind of think about the guys at the bottom of the list. Think about, what doesn't seem right. What would you really do in a draft? Would you really take this guy over that guy? Okay, if not, I'll move him up. And then when the draft happens, you have that consideration. Then you have, well, what does my team look like so far? You're not just looking at in a vacuum, would I rather have this quarterback or this running back? It's also the fact that I already have 2 running backs. And then I have a different choice to make. I moved Shane Vereen up over like Tom Brady because I just thought, I'm going to get a good quarterback in a 12-team league. It's in the 10th round. Why, in the 5th round, would I take somebody that, why wouldn't I take a scarce commodity when all the running backs are flying off the board that actually could have a lot of upside? But if I had 2 or 3 running backs already, yeah, I'd probably take Brady. I probably wouldn't take Vereen there. So it all just depends on context. And I guess I'm not really doing anything except just trying to let it sink in and trying to ignore hype about different players. I saw Brad Evans posted something about how Kevin Gilbride was kind of lukewarm on David Wilson's blocking ability. Go get Andre Brown. I don't know. I'm very agnostic. I don't want to get too caught up in that. I was already sort of concerned about that. I think it's a legitimate point Evans is making, certainly for the people who want to take Wilson in the 2nd or 3rd round. But if it's 3rd round, am I going to gamble on what would happen if Wilson does get the job? Yeah, maybe I would. I just think there's some situations you don't want to start to just buy into as this is a factor. You saw The Big Lebowski, right? You remember John Goodman's character?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, he was like, okay, look what happened. He stole our money and he bought this new car with it. That's what happened. Now I'm going to go smash up this brand new car with a golf club. Well, then it was just some random dude's car, And I think we do that all the time, assuming, oh, well, the coach kind of made this comment. Oh, this is what's going to happen. Here's the situation. Let's just go with this. I'm not drafting this guy anymore. Draft that guy. And then you realize, oh, well, the coach, he said that, but it had nothing to do with what really happened. I think, the key is not to be like John Goodman in The Big Lebowski and just, make these crazy assumptions based on a little bit of possible evidence and just try to keep an open mind. So, there's not much going on. There's going to be a lot of non-news that gets sort of elevated into news now, and you got to ignore it. But I will say, I did downgrade Aaron Hernandez a little bit based on that news.
Yeah, you went on a limb on that one there. What if you're like me, or not even like me? Let's say if you're someone that hasn't done any football research at all so far, haven't done any writing, just you've been completely away from football right now, you haven't done the top 200, how do you go get ready for your draft if you got one in 2 weeks?
Well, I would, basically just look at our top 200 list on RotoWire and click on the names and just start reading up on the latest news, the outlooks, pretty good. There's all the stuff from the magazines on the site, and just start clicking through and just saying, okay, here's the situation for all of these guys. I'd look at depth charts. I do this for baseball. I don't have to do it for football because I know them because I did the magazine. But I'd go through the depth charts and see, who's the starter, who's the backup, and click through and read the situations and just get a real knowledge of the player pool. And then I would probably make my own cheat sheet, based on what I learned. And I would just, do it based off of that. Now, if I didn't have a lot of time, if I have a full-time job and kids and I, have maybe, 3 hours to get ready for my draft, I would just simply print out the RotoWire cheat sheet and then really click, really try to read, just click through and read the names of the guys in the bottom half of it and see like which guy's there just because he's safe and which guy, could do nothing but could have a lot of upside, and kind of star those guys as possible sleepers, and then know as my draft gets a little deeper, these are guys I'm going to attack, a little earlier than maybe most people would.
What do you think most people overlook when they get ready for their drafts or when they're doing their drafts? What's the biggest mistake a guy can make in a fantasy football draft?
I think people are too concerned with what the situation is right now. I think it's baseball and football. I think they look at, the depth chart and they say, well, this guy's the starter. This guy's a backup. And sure, I mean, obviously if it's Adrian Peterson and Toby Gerhart, that's probably just going to be true unless Peterson gets hurt. But if it's a situation where it's like, Gerald Richardson and Isaiah Peed and Zach State, it's just better to look at, the usage from the year before, how the player plays, just understand the players, because whatever the situation is right now is not necessarily going to persist. And you just have to like get the facts, have an open mind, and then when the guy who's the backup drops the quote-unquote backup drops 4 rounds behind the quote-unquote starter, be really glad that you got whoever it was that dropped then. I'd much rather have Giovanni Bernard 3 rounds after Benjarvis Green-Ellis. I don't know if he's going to fall that far, but I don't care who's first on the depth chart. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out.
Good advice. All right, I'm looking forward to Vegas. I'm looking forward to doing our first real draft. We've done a couple of mocks. This time it counts more so than the All-Star game itself. So we'll review all that when we come back next week. Thanks for watching RotoWire TV.